Performing the title track from his current film, Ricochet, this is Ice-T. Come on, KP.
Syndicates in the house. Yeah. Evil E's in the house.
In 1991, Ice-T was hot, red hot. He had a gold-selling studio album with OG Original Gangster. He scored his first major film role with New Jack City, which was #1 in the country in its opening weekend and went on to be a critical and commercial success, with Ice penning and performing the movie's title track. And he was due for a repeat involvement with the arrival of Ricochet, his second film of the year. His billing was much higher here than in New Jack City, sharing space with Denzel Washington as LAPD officer turned assistant district attorney Nick Stiles against John Lithgow, playing the vengeful ex-con that Stiles had locked up. In Ricochet, Ice-T plays Odessa, a drug dealer raised in the same South Central Los Angeles area as his childhood friend Stiles, initially defiant to the thought of being on the right side of the law like the latter. And the title track goes beyond representing that stance. The Ricochet song wallops with a break from Sly and the Family Stone's Sing a Simple Song to provide a fitting atmosphere for his nocturnal mayhem, save for an official declaration to the end of his feud with LL Cool J, which he had started 3 years ago in his second album, Power. But Ice-T's record label, Sire Records, was less concerned about squashing beef than the one he was likely to instigate with law enforcement. 2 years earlier, gangster rap compatriots NWA had provoked the receipt of an FBI letter in response to their song, The Police, and went on a national tour to promote the album Where the Song Lives, 1988's Straight Outta Compton. NWA was under threat of imprisonment if they dared rap a syllable off the incendiary track. However, Priority Records, the company that distributed NWA's work and to which the FBI letter was actually sent, weren't going to be pushed into censoring the so-called world's most dangerous group, let alone drop them, for fear of any repercussions. On the other hand, Warner Brothers Records, the owner of Sire Records and under the communications conglomerate that was Time Warner, was skittish about such affairs. They sure weren't looking forward to an FBI letter sent to their headquarters. And some lyrics in Ricochet sounded problematic, to say the least.
You go on and you don't stop. Got sick these niggas from the blood of a shot cop.
It wasn't quite a bloodbath of cops dying in LA, as Ice Cube put it in The Police, but it was close enough. OG Original Gangster was still on the upper half of the Billboard 200 chart when Ice-T began recording songs for its follow-up, his fifth studio album. Ricochet was supposed to be included in the upcoming LP and possibly serve as the lead single, in the vein of New Jack Hustler serving as both the title track of the New Jack City soundtrack and OG Original Gangster's lead single. Instead, Ricochet ended up being excluded from Ice-T's upcoming album. Besides, Ricochet wasn't going to continue the success of Colors and New Jack City. The movie barely recouped its budget at the box office, and reviews were lukewarm. And while the title tracks of Colors and New Jack City netted Ice-T's only Billboard Hot 100 hits and constitute his only taste of pop success, Ricochet, the song, blanked out of the charts altogether. But to Ice-T, a paucity of radio success wasn't new. What was new was censorship from his own record company. He was going to prevent that sort of censorship from ever happening again by including his next like-minded song in the realm of another genre, and it would be performed by a band he was preparing to launch the following year. Ice-T had absolutely no idea that the censorship was only going to get worse. Some of the band's members had appeared as early as Ice-T's 1989 album, The Iceberg, Freedom of Speech, Just Watch What You Say, and the entire band finally had a track to themselves in the next album, OG Original Gangster. But the performance at an upcoming touring event was going to be the proper launch of Body Count, a heavy metal band that Ice-T had assembled with some of his classmates at Crenshaw High School. Named Lollapalooza, this event would involve musical acts from various genres touring across the United States and Canada from July 18th to August 28th, 1991. It turned out to be a huge success, leading music critics to retroactively hail the inaugural edition of Lollapalooza as helping to usher in the mainstream success of alternative rock. And one of the earliest acts to taste a bit of such success was Body Count. Some observers even touted the band's performances as the highlight of Lollapalooza 91. That must have delighted Ice-T, who was growing weary of the difficulties of booking venues for hardcore rappers like him. The violence at rap concerts didn't help, but neither did the embellishments and sensationalism of the mainstream press either. Rock shows, however, were nowhere as scrutinized, so when he got the call to join Lollapalooza as part of a farewell tour for Jane's Addiction, he didn't hesitate to accept the invitation. Body Count performed some of the songs that would end up on their self-titled debut album, which appeared on March 30th, 1992. Some reviewers were fascinated by Ice-T's utilization of what famed critic Robert Christgau termed the white skin privilege of a genre to his advantage, spewing lyrics that were more outrageous than he could have ever been on his rap records. For instance, in KKK, the B-side to the album's first single, There Goes the Neighborhood, Ice-T describes he and his bandmates getting it on with female associates of the Ku Klux Klan, including Ice himself impregnating the daughter of the Grand Wizard. Loud, brutish, and unrefined from front to back, Body Count's debut did have its share of critics who didn't care for the level of musicianship or the subject matter, which sounded more shock jock than thought-provoking, or the delivery style of Ice-T, which blurred the line between rapping and shouting. And it wasn't looking like Body Count was going to be a bestseller. It finally entered the Billboard 200 chart at number 32 in late April, almost a month after the album was released. Apparently, initially packaging copies in black body bags didn't help in pushing sales. But maybe a certain ongoing trial based on the highly publicized beating of a black motorist by 4 Los Angeles Police Department officers did. Body Count, the album, entered the charts a few days before the jury deliberations began on the Rodney King trial. And when the jury acquitted all 4 officers of assault, as well as 3 of the 4 of using excessive force, followed by the riots that engulfed Los Angeles in response to the acquittals, the letters started flowing into the offices of Warner Records. But it wasn't about KKK. It was about another song.
In the wake of the Rodney King verdict and the civil unrest in Los Angeles, some police officers across the country now say they're feeling threatened by the lyrics of a rap song.
I got my headlight turned on. I'm out to bust some shots off. I'm out to dust some cops off.
Cop Killer, the last track on the Body Count album, and which had been performed as early as August 12, 1991 at the CBGB Music Club in New York, was not released as a single. It wasn't even classified as a rap song, but Body Count was fronted by Ice-T, who happens to be, first and foremost, a rapper. And while Ice was quick to note that the song, in which he yells about disposing of cops who abused their scope of authority, the weapon of choice is a 12-gauge shotgun, is nothing more than a musical performance, detractors were not interested in picking up the nuance. They instead chose to believe that the rapper was actually encouraging people to pick up their firearms and use it indiscriminately on police officers. Outside of the National Black Police Association, probably knowing more than anyone else how it feels to be between a rock and a hard place, given Ice-T their pure unbridled support, the opposition mounted over the next 3 months. The Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas, the Dallas Police Association, the National Fraternal Order of Police, the Police Benevolent Association of the City of New York, several conservative groups and commentators.
Lou, I think the lyrics of the Cop Killer rap song by Ice-T are garbage and an outright incitement of violence against the police. Not only police groups, but any right-minded citizen should be infuriated by them. And I can't understand how any responsible company or corporate official could defend them. Unlike ordinary Americans, our police, with all their imperfections, put their lives on the line every day defending law and order, meaning you and me. Last year, 138 of them were killed in the line of duty.
President George H.W. Bush and Vice President Dan Quayle. Especially Quayle.
Let me reiterate how strongly I feel about one particular issue in the news today. It is wrong for a powerful, influential corporation like Time Warner to make money off a record that says it's okay to kill cops.
Even Time Warner, as much as they wanted to support Ice-T and his rights to express himself as an artist, still had to maintain their various relationships as a conglomerate. After all, they did wield wide-ranging interests in film, cable, animation, and television, in addition to music. Those relationships included Warner's shareholders, who had a meeting on July 16, 1992 at the Regent Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills, California. While about 100 people were marching outside the hotel in protest of Cop Killer, a certain shareholder stood out. A year away from his 70th birthday, Charlton Heston was a Hollywood legend, an Oscar winner for his leading role in 1959's Ben-Hur, and known to subsequent generations as Moses in Cecil B. DeMille's 1956 biblical epic, The Ten Commandments, among other credits such as Planet of the Apes, Earthquake, and The Greatest Show on Earth. In his younger years, he was a civil rights advocate. He even accompanied Martin Luther King Jr. on the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, an event in 1963 best known for the latter's I Have a Dream speech. But by the early 1990s, Heston had turned into a hard-boiled conservative, which included being a staunch supporter of President Ronald Reagan, who considerably scaled back the gains of the civil rights movement during his administration in the 1980s. And now, here he was, about to recite body count lyrics to confirm to those in attendance how totally depraved Ice-T was. If Ice-T thought Tipper Gore, the co-founder of the Parents Music Resource Center, or PMRC, was a formidable opponent, he hadn't met Moses. And Moses turned in a performance that should have won him a second Oscar.
I got my brain on hype. Tonight'll be your night. Die, 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 pig, die. The police. I know your family's grieving. 'Em.
Heston made it clear to the meeting, which included Time Warner's president and board of directors, that Ice-T wasn't really the target of his ire. The company was. And the company's response was, reportedly at Ice's request, to exclude Cop Killer from future copies of the Body Count album, while halting the manufacture of the original version and asking retailers to return the unsold copies to them for full credit. Warner started reissuing the album by late August. By then, the Body Count album had peaked on the Billboard 200 at number 26. The heavy metal album that was initially destined to disappear in a matter of weeks was now selling as many as 10,000 copies per month, and it was already gold before the reissued version hit stores. Ice-T, though, wasn't going to pop champagne for that RIAA certification, his fifth straight overall. He never could have imagined giving out copies of the original Body Count album version at concerts because he couldn't sell them. He never could have imagined his artist, Donald D., signed to his Rhyme Syndicate imprint under Sire, have the plug pulled on the video for his single, I'm Gonna Smoke Him. He never could have imagined the film he and Ice Cube were starring in, Looters, renamed Trespass, due to sensitivity in the aftermath of the LA riots. Coincidentally, the aforementioned Donald D single was included in the film soundtrack. He never could have imagined that Paris could be dropped from Warner's subsidiary Tommy Boy Records, no thanks to a new employee showing to law enforcement family members the insert of his upcoming album, Sleeping with the Enemy, which depicts the Bay Area black militant rapper waiting by the bushes to take out President Bush with a firearm. He never could have imagined other rap acts such as Tupac, Sister Soulja, Coogee Rap and DJ Polo, Intelligent Hoodlum, and Booyah Tribe have their content scrutinized, censored, or prevented from being released altogether. Rap music, not just gangster rap, was no longer at the margins of society. It was now at the center of media attention. And with the release date in November 1992 for his fifth album approaching, Ice-T had to wonder how much of his original work would remain. 6 songs, including Ricochet, were already off the album. Postponing the release date to February 1993 only fueled tensions between artistic freedoms and corporate interests, with Ice-T having to alter tracks to keep pace with a constantly changing landscape and the 1992 presidential election cycle. But the final straw ended up not being the songs, but the cover art. Illustrator Dave Halili had been responsible for the front cover of the Body Count album, and his services were once again employed for Ice-T's upcoming album, which was named Home Invasion. If Time Warner execs were taken aback by the front cover of Coogee Rap and DJ Polo's album Live and Let Die, from which they consequently withdrew their distribution support, They were even more shocked by Halili's illustration. There's a white teenager, surrounded by Ice Cube and Public Enemy cassette tapes, novels by Iceberg Slim and Donald Goines, and possibly the autobiography of Malcolm X, listening to music from his Walkman with a pair of Africa-oriented medallions dangling from his neck. The face of Ice-T hovering over the teenager, complete with connecting billowy beams, suggests that the latter is listening to the former's music. And behind him is murderous chaos. A middle-aged guy dressed like a white-collar professional being bludgeoned with the butt of a rifle by an intruder, a bikini-clad woman being assaulted by a second intruder, and a third intruder standing at the doorway with the door almost off its hinges. In the early 90s, there was perhaps no better visual metaphor of rap music's growing presence and influence, perceived threat to Middle America and its largest demographic of consumers.
One of the largest audiences of the hardcore music is the population of teenage white males. They are very, very interested in this form of music. They want to dress similar to Ice-T, wear the caps, whatever.
It was too much to take for Time Warner, who had just doused the fire that Cop Killer had caused and were not eager to cause another fire. But at least they were willing to work with Ice-T. There was no business incentive to be lenient with Coogee rap since he was never a gold or platinum selling rapper. Ice-T, on the other hand, was a music and media mogul in the making. Why not change the artwork to proceed with the album's release? Ice seemed to be initially compliant, even suggested that he can replace Halili's illustration with an all-black cover and change the album name to The Black Album. But ultimately, Ice had to be honest with himself and his future with Sire Warner. Every move of his was, and would continue to be, under a microscope. The next phase of Ice-T's career could have been an increasingly mutual relationship in which Ice used conglomerate prowess to fuel his rhyme syndicate enterprise. Instead, on January 26, 1993, Time Warner honored Ice's request for a release, ending a 7-year relationship with Sire Records that yielded 5 consecutive gold albums and 2 singles making it to the Billboard Hot 100. Only a few months earlier, Warner Brothers had sent out retail promotion sheets that touted Ice-T's upcoming album as the rapper's most assured work so far. What was going to be more assured, at least to Ice-T anyway, is being at a place where his wings weren't going to be clipped at any given moment. And that place was going to be Priority Records, already with a track record with NWA and its alumni Ice Cube, Eazy-E, and MC Ren. The home invasion would no longer be delayed.
Attention!
Home Invasion finally stormed into stores on March 23, 1993. DJ Aladdin and SLJ, debuting on OG Original Gangster with their production expertise, are back with Ice-T behind the boards. But missing on this go-round is Ice-T's long-time co-producer. A DJ at heart, Africa Islam was now touring overseas and opening up clubs. Couple that with Ice-T's ballooning schedule due to his acting career, and it would have been virtually impossible for these two to ever record a full album again. So Ice-T was left with Aladdin and SLJ in addition to 6 other contributors. It was the greatest number of production sources the MC had received up to that point. There was no longer Africa Islam around to provide a unifying, cohesive presence. But that might have been the least of Ice-T's worries. Home Invasion was supposed to be, to paraphrase him, the injection of black rage into the American white youth as the last stage of preparation for the revolution against institutional racism, with the most visible representatives, at least in this album, being corrupt law enforcement. And he was going to execute his plan, no matter how messy it was going to be. Warning opens the album with a monologue that warns the listener that they are about to listen to an Ice-T album, not a pop album. And just to make sure squares and suckers don't listen past the opening track, he lists vulgar words and phrases most likely to appear in the rest of the LP. Worthy of note, most of them don't. Its On starts with a foreboding string-bathed atmosphere, where Ice-T and his DJ, Evil E, use drug lord imagery as a metaphor for their severance of ties with Sire Warner.
I can't put any cut on the product. I just can't live like that.
A rapid succession of gunshots, an introduction of a chopped guitar loop of the round-robin Monopoly's Life is Funky, a scratch from Evil E, and a buckshot to go with the addition of a fattened hi-hatchy drum break, and Ice-T is ready to roll. First, on Moses himself.
Turn up the mic, dog, so I can get off. Find me dropping Heston and I might cut his head off. I'm not to be with.
And Heston isn't alone. Anyone who criticized Ice-T during the debacle of the previous year was going to get clobbered. And his victims include corporate shareholders, cop-killer protesters, and even the Source magazine, the so-called Bible of hip-hop. It's a delightfully savage opener, segueing perfectly into Ice MFT. The music, though, is not as impressive, since it consists of a gloomy mix of guitar wails, languid bass, and a drum break that feebly slaps rather than wallops. And Ice, while captivating with his delightfully repetitive hook, frustrations with the cop killer fallout, and a mainstream press that continues to misunderstand what he stands for.
A hoe is a hoe, a bitch is a bitch, a nigga's a nigga, and that's it. I'm through explaining this.
Frustrates with his tendency to make rhyming technique an afterthought. There are times when he pauses, thereby creating a noticeable length of silence between bars.
They call it controversy. I call it truth with no mercy.
To the ears of those who prize rhyming ability, Ice-T was never going to be a first listening experience, but while his average rhyming technique was tolerable in previous releases, such a level, let alone a decline, is unacceptable at album number 5. And what makes it worse is that the production is no better. Generally, there is very little melody, samples feel stacked rather than blended, and the overall sonic vibe feels dull. At least the LP's experience gets a bit better with Home Invasion. The beat rapidly pulsates with impending doom, thereby boosting Ice-T's lyrical fulfillment of racial Armageddon. The injection of black rage into the American white youth as the last stage of preparation for the revolution, according to Ice, is figuratively taking place.
And once I get them up under my fucking spell, they might start giving you fucking hell. Start changing the way they walk, they talk, they act. Now whose fucking fault was that?
There's, of course, a shot toward PMRC.
PMRC, suck my please. You can kiss my while you're on your knees.
And his imitation of a white kid who has no problem being abducted, literally and figuratively, by the Rhyme Syndicate.
Talk about you don't like rap, you don't like how I dress. Yo, you and Pop, I'm out of here. Both of y'all can kiss my.
But then the experience dips again with a long, laborious 4-verse G style. Sure, the song is fashioned as a freestyle.
But I don't do that.
Okay, let's take that back. But its structure and rhyming style feels more like an excuse for toothless barks. Ice-T was never reputed to be a battler or freestylist, and the dark, thin brew of a beat doesn't help matters. G-Style ends with a bizarre monologue of shoutouts to his industry friends and supporters that's capped off with a celebration of hardcore rap. Since when did Ice-T start to sound forced?
This is G-Style, mother.
Addicted to Danger should have been worthy of being in the same canon with 6 in the Morning and its prequel, Midnight. Instead, it's a rough, unfinished song about Ice-T as a gangster constantly living on the edge with a woman with which he recently made an acquaintance, and who would eventually cause his downfall. At least the dark piano loop adds a layer of intrigue, and the betrayal at the end is a satisfying, climax. But FYI, Darlene Ortiz wouldn't have done that, the betrayal part. Question and Answer is the successor of Ice-T's appraisal of the then maligned MC Hammer from the former's last album.
Shout out is going out to the one and only MC Hammer. A lot of people dish you, man. They just jealous.
Can you go from pop rap to hardcore rap, as Hammer was rumored to prepare to do? Yeah, sure. But how about the other way around because you think you would sell more records that way? That's a cop-out, and that makes you a sellout.
How does it feel to wake up every morning and look in the mirror and realize that you're a hoe?
Ironically, Hammer went hardcore because of the pop rap backlash in contrast with hardcore rap's growing dominance, especially with gangster rap. But Ice-T surely wasn't going to get any objections switching from a skit to a song. Watch the Ice Break finds Ice-T slowing down as he coldly delivers his battle bars over the throbbing thud of Junior Mance's "Thank you for letting me be myself again." Thankfully, he never sounds like he's trying too hard, even fleshing out the preceding skits with warning shots against those who dare attempt to fill MC Hammer's shoes. The handoff from Watch the Ice Break to Race War is the best segue in the album, with Evil E scratching from the former transitioning into an uproarious sound bed from the latter. But Race War, no pun intended, is a struggle, and it isn't because of the beat. Ice-T and Co. succeed in turning the Jimmy Castor Bunch's It's Just Begun and Droppin' Bombs, a song from SLJ's own outfit, Nile Kings, into a holy rumble, buttressed by a hook stitched together with vocals from Run DMC, Chill Rob G, and Big Daddy Kane. The issue, rather, is with Ice-T himself. The pause-and-go delivery is frustrating, with the beat waiting for an MC with the rhyming caliber of Kool G Rap and the social consciousness of Chuck D to eviscerate it. And then there's the premise that white supremacy in the United States is automatically against the country's non-black population, ignoring its perpetual ability to recruit other groups that are not necessarily classified as white to its advantage.
Cause being black ain't no minority, it's a fucking majority, so they gotta make us hate each other.
Considering what was transpiring in the post-civil rights era, including during the time Home Invasion was released, and the subsequent delineation between black and non-black groups, and even within the growing ethnic diversity of America's black citizenry, Race War hasn't exactly held up well topically and ideologically. Then it's back to Sonic Gloom, this time with a Death Wish soundtrack horn loop wrapped around the Skull Snaps breakbeat. No complaints here, because That's How I'm Living, released on September 21st, 1993 as Home Invasion's second single, kicks off the best section of the LP. Ice-T is a storytelling legend, and this track redeems him from the half-hearted Addicted to Danger by giving the listener a gripping account of his life, his orphaned childhood, his gang affiliation, his stint in the armed forces, his life of crime, the car accident that became a turning point in his life, and, finally, the moment of truth that turned him into a full-fledged MC.
All my homies was in court, or locked in the hole. This shit was getting old.
For once, the long pauses between bars are not necessarily a detriment. Ice-T keeps the momentum going with what turned out to be the album's lead single. Released on April 14th, 1993, I Ain't New to This is befittingly placed in the middle of the album with That's How I'm Living. It's Ice-T and the Rhyme Syndicate firing on all cylinders. The sound bed hitches the double bass plucks of Ramsey Lewis's What Now My Love and the looping of a creaking opening door from a track off a funk, soul, and jazz compilation to a steady drum tap for a jazzy yet booming groove. The beat is so tightly tuned that it seems to keep Ice's occasionally erratic flow in check. Nowhere else on this record does he sound so disciplined, and that fuels the plausibility of his adversary dissing rhymes, occasionally infused with a raga inflection and spread over 4 verses, his favorite format, with Evil E scratching Flavor Flav's vocals after every second verse. It also helps that I Ain't New to This has the best chorus or hook in the entire album.
Nigga, new to this, I ain't new to this, I ain't new to this, fool, new to this. Go round, you catch your left and a right, fist.
And then it's time for a break. An unconventional break. Ice-T switches roles with Evil E, who proceeds to lay down rhymes in Pimp Behind the Wheels. The sinister soundscape, which includes squeals and de-emphasized bass around the drum break from Mountain's Long Red, is ideal for Evil E to rap about his greatness behind the boards, as well as display his skills on the mic. Bad. And Ice-T lays down the cuts and scratches to remind the less acquainted that he was actually a DJ before he permanently turned to MCing. And oh yeah, since he's behind the wheels of steel, Ice gets to scratch in a specific song that didn't make Warner's final cut. But then Home Invasion gets a bit wobbly. Got a Lot of Love, which had been served to radio about 3 weeks before Ice-T's Warner contract was terminated, could have beamed next to songs like Cam's Peace Treaty. The Bloods and the Crips had been at loggerheads since they formed in the 1970s, and the consequences had been devastating to Black American communities in and around Los Angeles. The Rodney King trial and the LA riots may have seemed to have constituted a tipping point, but it was actually a group of community organizers, in addition to high-profile figures such as Louis Farrakhan and Jim Brown, who had been working behind the scenes for years to bring about what turned out to be a peace agreement between 4 sets based in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Watts. 2 from the Bloods, 2 from the Crips. It may have not involved the entirety of both gangs, but it was a start. Although Ice-T was aligned with the Crips, he denounced gang activity itself and constantly rhymed against getting involved in it, and the so-called Watts Truce was, to him, a step in the right direction. The same, however, can't be said for Got a Lot of Love, which has a murkiness that's akin to a swan bathing in mud. Granted, Ice-T's lyrics about black unity against a common enemy is heartfelt, but the chaos of these samples and complete lack of melody fail to give the buoyancy his rhymes desperately need. The situation hardly improves with Hits the Fan, which has Ice-T recounting his enchanting rendezvous with a wealthy swinger he met at the club, with his previously locked up homeboy and now body count member Shawnee Sean as his main audience. The storyline is fascinating, and Ice-T's performance is solid, but he's unfortunately surrounded by a crashing atmosphere that drowns out his topical potency. Thankfully, Home Invasion springs back to life with Depths of Hell, a brooding, funky number with an injection of dancehall from guest Daddy Nitro. Initially appearing on the Trespass soundtrack, Depths of Hell is Ice-T kicking cold rhymes to remind everyone of the guy who penned and performed 6 in the Morning.
Yo, I ain't no nigga to flex, but I will flip up and drop kick his.
He's a bad man. Following Depths of Hell is what would eventually become the most well-known song on Home Invasion. Ice-T was hanging out with 2 Live crew member Brother Marquise, who marveled at how catchy the hook was for the song Whoomp There It Is, a huge hit by fellow Miami bass act Tag Team that made it as far as number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and eventually went 4 times platinum by 1994. Marquise recalled how one of Tag Team's members, Cecil Glenn, aka DC, the Brain Supreme, who was working as the main DJ at the infamous Atlanta strip club named Magic City, would apply the phrase to women who bent over to showcase their ample derrieres. And that's when Marquise, still in amazement, uttered that infamous phrase.
Then out of nowhere, he said, man, I got 99 problems and ain't one. I said, what? I said, that's a song. So I made the song, and then I called Marquise up, and he did a verse on it. That was it.
In 99 Problems, it's Ice-T and Brother Marquise going through the list of women on their respective Rolodexes of standby sexual partners. It's a bawdy and hilarious trade of verses that are further bolstered by a beat mainly constructed from distorted guitars, horn squeals, and rolling drum loops from Funkadelic, Rufus Thomas, Funk Inc., The Blackbirds, and James Brown. No matter how many issues they have personally and professionally, bagging women will never be one of them.
So if you're having girl problems, I'm prepared for your son. Got 99 problems and a bitch ain't one. Hit it.
A decade later, Jay-Z would, of course, construct a song from the hook for one of the singles of his then farewell album, The Black Album, which, coincidentally, bears the same name and front cover concept that Ice-T almost gave Home Invasion. In Jay's version of 99 Problems, the bitch is not a woman, but a police dog, or canine, one of the instruments used against black American demonstrators during the civil rights movement of the 1960s to subdue and dehumanize them. For a guy who had been accused of being hedonistic and misogynistic throughout his career, 99 Problems, which tackles critics of rap music and includes a personal episode with racial profiling, became one of the cornerstones of Jay-Z's artistic and philosophical growth as he entered the latter half of his long and illustrious career. With the original version, though, the reverse was the case. Ice-T's 99 Problems sounds fun, and it's one of the album's better cuts, but it only further emphasizes the topical and artistic decline of Ice-T. Granted, each album of his had contained at least one track dedicated to sexual pleasure. But this is the first time where his contribution feels disdainful toward the opposite sex, and this perceived disregard is compounded by the social commentary on Home Invasion not feeling as sharp and focused as in previous LPs. As though to counterbalance his misogyny, Ice-T has someone make an appearance in the very next track, Funky Gripster.
The newest member of the syndicate, a 14-year-old female. Yeah, that's what I said, a female.
Quite a politician he is. Oakland native Brandy Younger, going by the stage name Gripsta, gets to lay out 4 verses on a howling and thumping beat. Her performance is decent, and you want to root for Ice-T's latest discovery. You can even hear and feel the Rhyme Syndicate boss and his henchmen cheer on. But you're not holding your breath thinking that she's going to be the next Queen Latifah, MC Lyte, or Yo-Yo. The somber message to the soldier sounds like an older warrior king weary of conflict and ready to pass his sword and staff of office to his successor. Ice-T was 35 years of age, which, in hip-hop at that time, was ancient. Fresher blood was needed against corrupt cops, dishonest journalists, predatory record labels, critics of rap music, and overt white supremacists. The 1990s are no different from the racial turbulence of the 1960s. The struggle continues, even if Ice-T, as he's handing out instructions and words of advice, isn't going to be participating much in it anymore. When Home Invasion comes to a close with the outro, Ain't a Damn Thing Changed, there is a baleful aura that is emitted from Ice-T reciting lines from Squeeze the Trigger, the last original track off his debut album. It feels like the conclusion of a cycle, that of the journey of a socially conscious OG. It would never be the same after this.
Squeeze the Trigger, 1986. Ain't a damn thing changed, motherfucker.
Home Invasion actually made it further up the Billboard 200 charts than any album Ice-T had previously released. Within 3 months, it was certified gold, Ice's 5th consecutive RIAA certification and 6th overall. The cop killer controversy certainly had a lot to do with the album's initial surge, but it also contributed mightily to withering reviews from the mainstream press. The general consensus? Ice-T was knocked off his game by the controversy. The new album didn't have the joviality of album number 1, the social-political focus of albums number 2 and 3, and the artistic zenith of album number 4. Album number 5 is actually more profane than any other Ice-T album that precedes it, and eventually, with no hit singles to boost it, Home Invasion had less staying power on the chart than all of its predecessors. It's hard to imagine, though, if Ice-T's commercial fortunes would have been any better if Cop Killer hadn't seen the light of day. He was already at his ceiling by the turn of the decade, and by the mid-90s, he was clearly no longer the virile OG of the game, included in the West Coast. Dr. Dre and Snoop Doggy Dogg were now the top dogs. No pun intended. Ice Cube was now scoring those pop hits that eluded him in his NWA and early solo recording days. Over in the East Coast, where Ice originally hailed from, hardcore rap became the dominant stylistic strain, minting dozens of acts that earned a strong measure of street acceptance and critical acclaim. Ice-T neither aligned with the prevailing G-Funk era of the West, nor measured up to the rhyming skill prized highly by the East. Essentially, Ice-T became artistically isolated from both camps. Moreover, the stunted success of Home Invasion in a post-major record label era meant the effective end of Rhyme Syndicate's larger aspirations. Not only was Africa Islam, the enterprise's co-founder, gone, but Home Invasion marked the last time DJ Aladdin would ever produce for an Ice-T album. Evil E, Ice's longtime DJ, was out the door after one more album. Body Count's next album, 1994's Born Dead, got a promo in Home Invasion's liner notes, but the band would never sell as many records as they did with their debut. And as for Gripsta, she would record a 12-inch single in 1994 and make guest appearances on subsequent tracks with acts such as South Central Cartel, Celly Cell, and yes, Ice-T himself. She even scored a minor role in the 1995 movie Dangerous Minds, starring Michelle Pfeiffer. But as for an album?
Wait on the LP coming out this year.
Yeah, that never happened.
No. And please, anybody who's listening and watching this, don't go out and do this. It's just music, you know what I'm saying? I just think it's up under a microscope at this point now, and people are so afraid of rap. They're saying, oh, this is what can happen. But the real problem is Home Invasion. That's the real problem. The real problem isn't what I'm saying on the record. The real problem is that white kids in America are now singing these words. The records that came out this past year, along with mine, Ice Cube, Ghetto Boys, Dr. Dre, all these records are hardcore. But my record, for some unknown reason, has been sucked into the white community. We've injected our anger into them.
And I feel the allies, the white youth that are out there that understand this injustice is the only chance that my brothers and sisters, black people, will have a chance to really make a move in the future. I think you're dealing with a revolutionary period at this point.
Through the late 80s and early 90s, Ice-T was one of hardcore rap's central figures due to his innovations as one of the founders of what would come to be known as the gangster rap subgenre. Home Invasion, however, was the first album that indicated that Ice-T was losing a step or two. It's scattershot, erratically sequenced, sonically inconsistent and outdated, and suffers from a downgrade of rhyming ability. But in the midst of its chaos is a record that's still fascinating in its spurts of promise, brilliance, and responses to adversity. Similar to his ex-arch-rival LL Cool J's 1989 album, Walking with a Panther. It's like watching a fading heavyweight boxing champion occasionally landing hard punches to his latest opponent after years of accumulative assault and managing to eke out a split decision in his favor. From then on, Home Invasion would be as good as it could ever get from OG Ice-T. Thanks for watching. For those new here, welcome to Rap Perspective. For the Rappleheads, I greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, comment on, and share this video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I encourage everyone to watch, like, comment on, and share other videos on here. See you in the next video.